Well, time now to take a look at what is going on with the weather across the country and around the world as we get into the month of September. Joining us now to give us an update, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien Ag Solutions. Eric, good to catch up with you, and hope you had a nice long Labor Day holiday weekend. And sounds like some folks caught a little rain, and we got some temperatures that are going to lessen a little bit. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute, but I want to start internationally first because feels like we got a lot more activity going on around the world versus here in the US here as we look at this week, Eric.
Yeah, so here's the rundown of things I'm watching. Let's just go as far east as we can. Let's talk about China. There's been some better rains that have hit parts of the North China Plain, Manchurian Plain, but around the Yangtze River, it's been a bit drier. India, which had a pretty kind of pathetic finish to their monsoon, has lately had a pretty big surge of moisture coming through most of Southeast Asia, all the way down to Indonesia has as well. Australia's a bit on the drier side right now, but that's not too far away from what we'd expect. Over the weekend in Europe, they had a large storm system that kind of sunk toward the south over the Mediterranean and absolutely flooded out Greece. I'm not sure if you saw this in the news, but incredibly heavy rainfall hitting that particular part. But I think the big thing we have to think about is what's going on in South America. So last week, maybe for the last 5 or 6 days, I keep hearing about early planting being granted by the government. Then I hear that it's been kind of rescinded, and then it doesn't matter. They're going to start planting in 10 days regardless. But the problem is that the MJO, we often talk about that, it's not in a
Mhm.
favorable position to help the monsoon really deliver a lot of rainfall right now. So much of Brazil's northern and eastern growing areas are dry, and it's very, very wet south. Now, they don't plant early down south. So I'm talking about like near Paraguay, getting over into Paraná, getting into like Rio Grande do Sul. But there's a lot of heavy rain down there right now. It's putting water on the Parana River system. That actually gets into Argentina, goes out through like Rosario. So this is important early season rains. But we do expect the monsoon to kind of come on down south and kind of fits and starts, which means there's a lot of folks that are going to be waiting on at least 2 inches of rainfall before they get going. So it may not be the super fast start that was possible in South America, but at this point, my biggest concern is northern growing areas could struggle with a little bit of dryness throughout the season. The monsoon may shut down a little early given the strength of this El Nino. But outside of that, there aren't any major wild cards that or factors that I'm watching that would tell me to tell you
Mhm.
that Brazil is in big trouble. I don't see that.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what I see going on internationally.
I was gonna say, you mentioned some of that rapid planting pace that was expected. I know we've seen the government in Brazil give some waivers to some growers here to possibly start planting already. But with some of that heavy rain in the south, and then you mentioned look at some of those northern growing areas, Mato Grosso, for instance, where I'm thinking those waivers are at.
Yeah.
But to that point, like you said there, not expecting anything major in the way of delays right now or problems for Brazil.
No, and I've even heard mixed reasons on why they wanted to get in early. I heard lower disease pressure. I heard
Mhm.
that they're worried about the safrinha crop, so the faster they get beans in, the better they can beat the potential problems on the safrinha crop.
Sure.
But the reality of it is that they have to wait on the rain anyway. So they will not plant into dust. They got to get that moisture in. So weather is going to dictate the start of this. And over the next 10 plus days, it's drier in big sections of Brazil.
All right, let's talk the US. Let's shift gears here. We got through the holiday weekend. A lot of worry was that we were going to stay hot and dry in this first part of September, but looks like that's changed a little bit. We've seen some rain come into the forecast here, and we're seeing cooler temperatures as well, it appears. So get us up to speed. What's changed with the forecast here, Eric?
Yeah, that was a pretty big bust, not only on my part, but I think everybody. I think we all thought that through at least the middle of this month there would be a big ridge somewhere between Texas and Michigan, just kind of living in that area. Well, things have changed, and over the weekend, long weekend, we watched deeper troughs pull into the Gulf of Alaska or into Alaska. So that means the heat's going to back up to the west. We'll have more chances of cooler air through the middle of the month in the central U.S. and with the Great Lakes in the east, meaning that the little heat waves we keep enduring, they're just that. They're coming through in short bursts because it was certainly hot for 4 or 5 days here across the midsection of the country, but it just doesn't last long. The heat is staying anchored down south in Texas, which has been unbearable this entire growing season. But with the changes, bring a couple of other things. You bring in more cold fronts, we get better chances for some rainfall. Central US has a good chance of getting some decent rains over the next 10 days. Not the majority of the Corn Belt. We still see drier conditions overall. There'll be chances for rain in the Corn Belt, but it's not widespread soakers to undo the fact that soil moisture values are down there so low, which of course is affecting the Mississippi River, which I checked this morning. It's below 5 feet.
Mm.
Excuse me, it is more than 5 feet below low stage, which was 2 feet lower than it was a year ago at this time. But last year, it was late September and October that drove the river down to where it was not navigable. So we have to keep an eye on that going forward. But yeah, you're right. A break towards some cooler weather coming in. In fact, there was some snow in Utah over the weekend. We actually saw temperatures this morning in Nevada get down close to freezing. And remember, that follows a weekend of incredibly heavy rains in Nevada. I'm sure you saw some of the video from the
Mhm.
Burning Man, all the flooding that happened out there. Just incredible to see that.
Yeah.
So, long story short, we've had a dry second half of August, and I don't necessarily see it going over super wet now, but we need to see September and October rains to really recover the moisture on the Mississippi River. Bad part about that is we get rain at that time, it impacts harvest.
I was just gonna say, I've been hearing some anecdotes, with this crop not necessarily drying down, but dying down from some of that heat and dryness. And some folks talking an early harvest potentially here in parts of the Corn Belt. But if we get wet here over the next couple of weeks, what would that do to harvest, Eric? I think that's a fair question, and it's something we've been here before in that case, right?
Yeah, so it's going to make harvest windows a premium, and this is going to affect the cost of getting your crop to dry down. And we all love a dry harvest, but when we already have these subsurface soil moisture issues, then the overall health of our whole ag ecosystem is actually such that we need the moisture, back in place. And also, one thing just to put in your mind, the newest long range forecast been coming out for winter, and holy smokes, do they want to give us an El Nino blast of chaos?
Mm.
Super wet across the South, eliminating drought in Texas, wiping just straight through the southern part of the United States. If there's an area that stays in drought, it seems to be the Pacific Northwest. It looks like it's going to be a pretty wild ride this winter as El Nino really flexes and gets up there, possibly into that strong to maybe even, super Nino status. Now, I'm skeptical on how strong this one's going to be, but my goodness, it is not. It's not a wimp. It's coming in, and it will likely influence things in a big way.
Well, we'll be watching El Nino, of course, as we go through and into harvest and beyond. And of course, folks can stay up to date with Eric's latest weather forecast. They could sign up for his weekly newsletter or check out the latest details for their backyard, ag-wx.com. Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien. Always good to catch up with you. Have a great week. We'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, thanks.